"I will make you fertile again," he declared to the infertile daughter sold by her father. The deal was struck in broad daylight, dust swirling, church bell tolling, and neighbors jeering. A broken young woman, shamed for being barren, handed over like cattle. And the man who bought her? He didn't just claim her, he promised to give her back what the world had stolen. But behind that bold vow lies more than love. A preacher in debt to the railroad wants their marriage destroyed. Agents ride at night, setting fire and spreading lies. And a wild-eyed orphan appears at their door, forcing the barren bride to mother a child not her own. Is his promise a miracle of faith or a curse waiting to break them both? When the land is burning, the town is against them, and the child is stolen away. What happens when the only thing left to fight with is hope? Will love truly make her fertile again? Or will the frontier's cruelty tear their family apart before it even begins? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The autumn wind whistled sharp and cold across the Holt ranch yard, rustling dead leaves against weathered fence posts. Dawn had barely broken, painting the Colorado sky in streaks of pale gold and bitter gray. Sophia Holt stood beside the empty cattle pen, clutching a small cloth bundle to her chest. Her plain brown dress offered little protection against the chill, but she barely noticed the cold. The shame burning in her cheeks kept her warm enough. Wagon wheels creaked and horses stamped as neighbors from miles around arrived, drawn by her father's announcement of an unusual auction. Some faces showed pity, others cruel curiosity. Sophia recognized most of them. Families who'd shared church pews and barn raisings in better days before the drought and her father's drinking had ruined everything. James Holt emerged from the house, a half-empty whiskey bottle dangling from his fingers. His boots left uneven tracks in the dirt as he stumbled toward the gathered crowd. Though the sun had barely risen, his face was already flushed with drink. "Mighty obliged you all could make it," he called out, his voice carrying a mean edge. "Got something worth your while today, though maybe not much." He gestured roughly toward Sophia. "My daughter here, 22 years old and barren as the desert. 5 years married to Tom Wesley before he died. May he rest in peace, and not a single child to show for it." Sophia flinched at the words, each one striking like a physical blow. Her eyes burned, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. The bundle in her arms held everything she owned: a change of clothes, her mother's worn Bible, and a small tin of dried herbs. 5 years of marriage, and this was all she had to show for it. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Baker, who'd lost 3 babies herself, reached for her husband's hand. Young Willie Thompson spat in the dirt. His mother cuffed him, but her own expression showed more disgust than sympathy. "Starting bid is 2 head of cattle," James announced. "Might not be worth much as a wife, but she can cook and clean well enough. Any takers?" Silence fell heavy as stone. Sophia's cheeks blazed hotter. She'd known this was coming, had heard her father's drunken threats often enough these past months since Tom's death. But the reality of standing here, being auctioned off like a piece of livestock, made her stomach twist. "1 head," called Ezra Jenkins finally. He was old enough to be her grandfather, with 3 grown sons and a reputation for working hired help half to death. And that's being generous. James Holt's face darkened. 2 head was the starting bid. "You deaf as well as cheap, Jenkins?" "Now, James," drawled Pete Wilson. "Way I see it, you're the one trying to sell damaged goods. 1 head's more than fair." More murmurs of agreement. Sophia wrapped her arms tighter around her bundle, wishing she could disappear into the ground. The morning air grew colder, or maybe it was just the ice forming around her heart. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew all eyes to the road. A massive black stallion appeared through the morning mist, its rider even more imposing. Sam Boone sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders wrapped in a worn leather coat. He guided his horse into the yard with quiet confidence, taking in the scene with steady eyes. Sophia had seen him at church sometimes, sitting alone in the back pew. Widowed young, folks said, though she didn't know the details. His ranch lay up in the foothills, and he rarely came to town except for supplies and Sunday services. 4 head of cattle, he said clearly, his deep voice carrying across the yard, and $50 cash. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. Even James Holt looked startled, the bottle slipping from his fingers to shatter on the packed earth. Now hold on, Jenkins protested. That's 5 head, Sam continued as if no one had spoken. And $75, final offer. His gaze met Sophia's briefly, then turned to her father. Do we have a deal, Holt? James recovered quickly, greed overcoming surprise. Well, now that's more like it. Anybody want to top that generous offer? He looked around hopefully, but the crowd had gone silent again, this time with shock rather than scorn. Going once, James called, warming to his role as auctioneer. Going twice. He paused dramatically, but no other bids came. Sold. To Sam Boone for 5 head and $75 cash. Sam dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots raising small clouds of dust as he crossed the yard. He pulled a leather wallet from his coat and counted out the bills, pressing them into James Holt's eager hand. I'll have the cattle delivered by sundown, he said quietly. Then he turned to Sophia, who hadn't moved from her spot by the pen. Up close, he was even more massive, but his movements were gentle as he shrugged out of his coat. Without a word, he draped it around her shoulders. The leather was warm from his body, carrying a clean scent of soap and horses. If you're ready, Miss Sophia? His voice was soft, meant for her ears alone. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The coat engulfed her, its weight somehow both protective and terrifying. What kind of man would pay so much for a barren woman? What did he expect in return? As Sam led her toward his horse, the crowd parted. Some faces showed relief, others disappointment at the anticlimactic end to the morning's entertainment. A few called out crude suggestions that made Sophia's face flame anew. Reckon you overpaid, Boone. Hope you got something else to warm your bed. I might as well have bought a mule, at least it'd give you offspring. Sam's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond to the taunts. His hand at her elbow was steady as he helped her mount, then swung up behind her. The stallion shifted under their combined weight, but Sam gathered the reins with practiced ease. Hold on, he murmured, and Sophia gripped the saddle horn as they started forward. She didn't look back at her father or the dispersing crowd, didn't want to see if James Holt was already drinking away his profits or if anyone showed a shred of remorse for their part in her humiliation. The morning mist still clung to the foothills as they rode away from the ranch yard, wreathing the landscape in gray. Sophia sat stiffly, trying to keep space between her back and Sam's chest despite the close quarters of the saddle. His arms bracketed her on either side as he held the reins, but he was careful not to crowd her. The steady rhythm of the horse's hooves filled the silence. Wind whistled through bare branches, and somewhere a meadowlark called. Such ordinary sounds on such an extraordinary morning. Less than an hour ago, she'd been James Holt's unwanted daughter. Now she belonged to this stranger who'd paid an outrageous sum for a woman everyone knew was worthless. Sam's coat was heavy around her shoulders, warming her against the autumn chill. But inside, Sophia felt frozen, wondering what new trials awaited at the end of this ride. She clutched her small bundle of possessions closer, taking comfort in the familiar shape of her mother's Bible pressed against her heart. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same quiet dignity she'd shown in the ranch yard. It was all she had left. The black stallion picked its way carefully along the rising trail, carrying its double burden toward the distant foothills where Sam Boone made his home. Behind them, the sun climbed higher in the cold Colorado sky, burning away the last traces of morning mist. A new day was beginning, for better or worse. Sophia lifted her chin and faced forward, leaving the echoes of cruel laughter and her father's drunken voice to fade into the autumn wind. Sam's black stallion carried them until mid-afternoon, when they reached a weathered wagon waiting by a stand of cottonwoods. The horses' sides were flecked with sweat from bearing their double burden across the rough terrain. We'll finish the journey by wagon, Sam explained, his voice still holding that same gentle steadiness from the morning. More comfortable for the long haul ahead. He dismounted first, then reached up to help Sophia down. His huge hands spanned her waist easily, but his touch remained respectful as he set her on her feet. Sophia stumbled slightly, her legs stiff from hours in the saddle. Sam's hand caught her elbow, steadying her without comment. The wagon was well maintained, its wooden bed lined with fresh hay and a heavy quilt. Supplies were neatly stowed: flour and coffee, tools wrapped in oilcloth, even a small crate that looked to contain books. Not the careless preparations of a man who'd made an impulsive purchase, Sophia realized. Sam Boone had come prepared. "The road gets rough from here," Sam said, securing his stallion to the back of the wagon. "Best to let the wagon horses handle it. They know the way." Sophia nodded, clutching her bundle closer. His coat still draped her shoulders, though the day had warmed considerably. She should return it, but something in her couldn't bear to shed that layer of protection just yet. Sam helped her up onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her. The reins looked like thread in his massive hands as he clucked to the matched pair of draft horses. They set off at a steady pace, iron-bound wheels creaking over the rutted trail. The sun began its slow descent toward the western peaks, painting the sky in deepening shades of gold and rose. Sophia sat rigid on the hard seat, hands folded in her lap, watching shadows lengthen across the landscape. She waited for the questions to begin, for Sam to stake his claim on his purchase. But he seemed content to let the silence stretch between them, broken only by the horse's hooves and the wagon's familiar sounds. Finally, when the tension became unbearable, Sophia gathered her courage. "What?" She swallowed hard and tried again. "What will you expect of me, Mr. Boone?" Sam glanced at her, then returned his attention to the trail ahead. "First off, it's just Sam. No need for formality between us." He adjusted the reins slightly as they navigated around a deep rut. "As for expectations, my place needs a woman's touch. Plain and simple. Cooking, cleaning, mending. The usual things that keep a homestead running smooth." It wasn't the answer she'd expected. Sophia ventured another question. "You paid a lot for someone who can't." The word stuck in her throat. "For someone who can't bear children?" Sam finished quietly. When she nodded, he sighed. "Miss Sophia, I've watched good women tear themselves apart over that particular burden. My late wife among them." The admission startled her. She'd heard he was widowed, but nothing more. Sam continued, his voice thoughtful. "Sarah and I tried for 5 years to have a child. Watched her sister birth 4 healthy babies in that same time. The shame nearly broke her." His hands tightened on the reins. "Found out later it was my fault. An old injury that left me unable, but she carried that burden of blame right to her grave." Sophia's heart ached for the pain she heard beneath his matter-of-fact words. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He acknowledged her sympathy with a slight nod. "Point is, I know something about living under that shadow. When I heard what your father planned," his jaw clenched, "well, I couldn't stand by and watch another good woman be broken by such cruelty." The wagon rolled to a stop as Sam drew back on the reins. The sun hung low on the horizon now, shadows pooling in the hollows between hills. He turned to face her fully, his eyes intent on hers. "I will make you fertile again," he said, each word clear and deliberate. "Not with cruelty, but with care. A woman's worth isn't measured in children, Miss Sophia. Sometimes the most fertile ground is the heart itself." Sophia's breath caught at the unexpected poetry in his rough voice. She searched his face for any sign of mockery or deceit, but found only steady conviction. "It's getting dark," Sam said after a moment, gathering up the reins again. "We'll make camp here for the night. My place is still half a day's journey, and these trails aren't safe after sunset." He helped her down from the wagon, then set about making camp with practiced efficiency. Sophia stood uncertainly until he pointed out where she could gather kindling for the fire. The simple task gave her hands purpose, helped settle her whirling thoughts. Soon a cheerful fire crackled, pushing back the gathering darkness. Sam produced a pot of beans and a loaf of bread from his supplies. The food was simple but filling, seasoned with hunger and the clean mountain air. They ate in comfortable silence, the flames casting dancing shadows across their faces. Sophia watched Sam covertly as he tended the fire. His massive frame should have frightened her, especially alone in the wilderness. But there was a gentleness in his movements that belied his size. The same care showed in how he'd prepared for her arrival. The quilt in the wagon, the extra plate and cup, even a small bag of hard candies he'd offered after the meal. "I'll sleep under the wagon," he said as the last light faded from the sky. "You take the bed. I've arranged plenty of blankets to keep you warm." True to his word, he'd created a snug nest in the wagon bed, using hay and quilts to cushion the hardboards. Sophia climbed up, Sam's coat still wrapped around her shoulders. She couldn't bring herself to return it yet, and he hadn't asked. "Sleep well, Miss Sophia," he said simply, disappearing beneath the wagon with his own bedroll. But sleep proved elusive. Sophia lay awake, watching stars wheel overhead through gaps in the surrounding trees. Crickets filled the night with their persistent song, a familiar chorus that somehow made this strange place feel less foreign. Sam's words echoed in her mind. "I will make you fertile again, not with cruelty, but with care." She turned the promise over and over, letting it take root in soil she'd thought forever barren. Hope was a dangerous thing for a woman in her position. And yet the crickets sang on, witnessing her silent vigil. Sophia's hand crept to the small Bible in her bundle, finding comfort in its worn leather cover. Perhaps Sam was right about fertility of the heart. Perhaps there were different ways to measure a woman's worth than the children she could bear. She whispered his words again, testing their weight against years of shame and mockery. Not with cruelty, but with care. The promise settled over her like a blanket, warmer than the coat still draped across her shoulders. Sleep finally began to creep in, softening the edges of her thoughts. The fire burned low, casting a gentle glow across their camp. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. Sophia's eyes grew heavy as the cricket song wove through her consciousness. Sam's words followed her down into dreams, planting seeds in ground she'd thought forever dead. Not with cruelty, but with care. Not with cruelty, but with care. Dawn painted the eastern sky in watercolor strokes of pink and gold as Sam's wagon lurched onto a steeper trail. Sophia gripped the wooden seat, her knuckles white against the rough boards. The path wound upward through stands of towering pines, their branches casting lacy shadows across the rutted earth. "Almost home," Sam said, guiding the horses around a sharp bend. "Trail's a mite treacherous, but the view's worth every step." As if to prove his point, the trees suddenly parted, revealing a vista that stole Sophia's breath. The valley spread below them like a patchwork quilt, morning mist still clinging to its hollows. Above, the mountains reached toward heaven, their snow-capped peaks catching the first rays of sunlight. The wagon crested the rise, and Sophia got her first glimpse of Sam's homestead. The cabin nestled against the pine-covered slope like it had grown there naturally, its sturdy logs weathered to a soft silver gray. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, carrying the sweet scent of cedar. A barn stood to one side, its red paint faded but intact, while various outbuildings and sheds dotted the clearing. Sam drew the wagon to a halt in the yard. "It ain't much," he said, a note of uncertainty in his deep voice. "But it's solid. Built most of it myself." "It's beautiful," Sophia whispered, and meant it. After years of her father's neglected ranch, the careful maintenance evident in every fence post and roof board spoke volumes about the man beside her. Sam helped her down from the wagon, his massive hands gentle at her waist. The mountain air felt different here. Cleaner, sharper, filled with the scent of pine sap and distant snow. A chickadee called from somewhere nearby, its cheerful song echoing across the yard. "Let me show you around," Sam said, leading the way toward the cabin. The door opened with a familiar creak, releasing a wave of trapped warmth. Inside, the main room was simple but well-ordered. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth swept clean. Heavy furniture, all handmade from local pine, spoke of Sam's skill with tools. Everything gleamed with polish and care, though a fine layer of dust covered the surfaces. "Kitchen's through here," Sam continued, gesturing to a smaller room. "Got a good pump right at the sink. No need to haul water from outside for cooking." He paused, then added softly, "Sarah, my late wife. She always said that was the greatest luxury." Sophia ran her hand along the worn counter, noting the quality of the woodwork. "You built this too?" Sam nodded, a ghost of pride crossing his face. "Every cabinet and shelf. Sarah drew up the plans, said a kitchen ought to fit the woman working in it." He cleared his throat. "Your room's just down the hall. Thought you might want to get settled before we tackle the outside chores." The bedroom was small but bright, with a window overlooking the garden patch. A narrow bed dressed in clean linens stood against one wall, while a simple dresser waited for her few belongings. Someone, Sam, she realized with a start, had placed a small vase of late wildflowers on the windowsill. "I'll let you get situated," Sam said from the doorway. "Meet me in the barn when you're ready. Got morning chores waiting." Alone, Sophia unpacked her meager possessions. The dresser drawers smelled of cedar, a thoughtful touch that brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She changed into her work dress, determined to prove her worth despite her inexperience. The barn stood tall against the morning sky, its wide doors open to the clean mountain air. Inside, the familiar sense of hay and leather mingled with the sweeter smell of fresh milk. Sam was already at work, his sleeves rolled up as he filled water troughs. "Thought you might want to learn the routine," he said, nodding toward a row of buckets, starting with the easier tasks first. Sophia approached the nearest bucket, setting her feet and lifting with determination. The weight nearly toppled her, water sloshing over the rim. Sam stepped forward, but she shook her head. "I can do this," she insisted, though her arms trembled. "No doubt about that," Sam agreed easily. "But there's no shame in building strength over time." Here, he demonstrated a better way to lift, using her legs instead of her back. "My father always said work's like a river, best to learn its ways before jumping in too deep." They spent the morning moving through the chores together. Sam showed her the chicken coop, the tool shed, and the garden patch where late vegetables still grew sturdy and green. Everything had its place and purpose, a rhythm as natural as breathing. When Sophia's arms gave out, Sam quietly took over the heavier tasks, letting her catch her breath without comment. By supper time, exhaustion had settled deep in Sophia's bones, but satisfaction came with it. She'd learned more in one day than in years of watching others work. Sam had proven to be a patient teacher, offering guidance without criticism. The kitchen filled with warmth as she helped prepare a simple meal of salt pork and potatoes. Sam moved around her carefully in the small space, reaching for plates and cups with the ease of long habit. When everything was ready, he pulled out a chair for her at the scarred wooden table. "If you don't mind," he said quietly, "I usually say grace before meals." Sophia's hands stilled in her lap. The words of childhood prayers rose unbidden in her memory, then faded like smoke. I haven't prayed in years," she admitted, shame coloring her voice. "Not since Mother died." Sam's eyes held no judgment, only gentle understanding. "Faith's like spring water," he said, his deep voice soft in the lamplight. "Sometimes it goes underground for a spell, but it's still there, waiting to surface when the time is right." He extended his weathered hands. "No pressure to join in. Just listen if you'd rather." After a moment's hesitation, Sophia placed her smaller hands in his. The simple contact anchored her as Sam's words filled the quiet kitchen. "Lord, we thank you for this food and the hands that prepared it, for this roof over our heads and work to fill our days, for new beginnings and second chances. And Lord, we ask your blessing on this home and all who dwell within it. Amen." The prayer settled over them like a comfortable blanket. They ate in companionable silence, broken only by the clink of forks against plates and the distant song of evening birds. Outside, the mountain air grew crisp with approaching night. When the dishes were done and the kitchen put to rights, Sam bid her goodnight with the same quiet courtesy he'd shown all day. Sophia retreated to her small room, changed into her nightdress, and sat on the edge of the narrow bed. Her mother's handkerchief, carefully preserved through years of hardship, lay folded in her hands. The embroidered flowers were faded now, but their delicate shapes still spoke of beauty and hope. Sophia pressed the soft cotton to her cheek, breathing in the ghost of lavender that somehow lingered in its fibers. The day's events washed over her. The stunning vista, the solid cabin, Sam's patient teaching and simple prayer. For the first time in years, she felt the ground beneath her feet as something other than a trap. Here, in this room that smelled of cedar and wildflowers, she was safer than she'd been since her mother's death. Sleep beckoned, but Sophia lingered awake a moment longer, listening to the night sounds of her new home. Wind in the pines, a coyote's distant call, the settling of log walls. different from the prairie sounds she'd known all her life, yet somehow right. The handkerchief remained clutched in her fingers as she finally lay down, its familiar touch a bridge between past and present. Uncertainty still clouded her future, but for now, in this moment, she was anchored in something that felt remarkably like peace. Dawn crept over the mountain peaks, painting the cabin windows with soft golden light. Sophia woke before the sun fully rose, her body aching from yesterday's work, but her mind clear with purpose. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she dressed quickly in her work dress, determined to start the day right. In the kitchen, she stood before the flour barrel, shoulders squared. "I can do this," she whispered to herself, measuring cups of flour into a bowl like she'd watched her mother do countless times. The yeast bloomed in warm water, and she mixed it carefully with the flour, adding a pinch of salt. Her hands remembered the motions of kneading, though the dough fought her efforts, staying stubbornly sticky. Still, she persisted, working it against the floured counter until her arms trembled. The morning light strengthened as she shaped the reluctant mass into loaves and set them to rise near the stove's warmth. Sam's heavy boots announced his return from the barn. "Morning," he said, hanging his hat on its peg. "Smells like you're tackling bread." "Trying to," Sophia admitted, brushing flour from her apron. "Though I fear it may tackle me instead." A smile tugged at Sam's mouth. "Bread's got a mind of its own sometimes. Sarah used to say you had to sweet-talk it into behaving." The dough rose slower than Sophia remembered it should, but she eventually deemed it ready and slid the loaves into the hot oven. While they baked, she gathered eggs from the chicken coop, the hens pecking curiously at her skirts. Their soft clucking reminded her of easier days before her mother's death had left her alone with her father's bitterness. "Don't mind those old biddies," Sam called from where he mended fence nearby. "They're just sizing you up. Try scattering the feed in a wide arc. Gives everyone a fair chance at breakfast." Sophia tried his suggestion and the grain scattered wildly, some landing in her own hair. To her surprise, she found herself laughing at the chaos as chickens darted around her feet. Sam's deep chuckle joined hers, the sound warming the morning air. The smell of burning bread cut through their mirth. Sophia ran for the kitchen, yanking open the oven door to find 2 blackened lumps where her loaves should have been. Disappointment welled up, threatening tears. "Well," Sam said from the doorway, "reckon that's one way to make toast." His gentle teasing took the sting from the failure. "First batch always burns. It's practically a rule. Got some store bread to tide us over till you try again." The week settled into a rhythm of daily tasks and small victories mixed with minor disasters. Sophia's muscles slowly strengthened, and she learned to gauge the heat of the oven better. Sam's patient guidance made each lesson easier to bear. On Saturday, they hitched the wagon for the trip to town. Sophia's stomach knotted as they approached the cluster of buildings that made up Wilson's Creek. She hadn't been to town since before her father's cruel auction, and memories of that day still burned. The general store's bell announced their entrance. Mrs. Wilson, the owner's wife, looked up from her ledger, her eyes widening in recognition. Whispers started immediately, spreading like wind through dry grass. "Ain't that James Holt's barren daughter? Heard she went for 3 head of cattle and some cash. Shame to see good stock wasted on damaged good, no." Each word struck like a physical blow. Sophia's hands trembled as she examined a bolt of calico, pretending not to hear. The fabric blurred before her eyes. Sam's voice cut through the whispers, deep and firm as mountain bedrock. "Mrs. Wilson, I'd appreciate your finest flour for my wife's baking." The word wife rang clear and deliberate. She's showing quite a talent for it. The whispers stuttered to silence. Sam stood tall beside Sophia, his presence solid and unwavering. His hand found the small of her back, steadying her. "And some sugar too, if you please," he continued, as if the undercurrent of cruelty had never existed. "Proper sweet rolls need proper ingredients." Mrs. Wilson's face flushed as she hurried to fill their order. Sam paid without hurry, his manner casual but his eyes sharp, daring anyone to speak another word against Sophia. The store remained unusually quiet as they loaded their purchases into the wagon. The ride home was silent until they cleared the town limits. Then Sophia found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "Thank you." for what you said in there." Sam kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "Meant every word. People round here respect honest work and honest folk. They'll learn to see you true, given time." That evening, after the chores were done, they sat together on the cabin's porch. The first stars pricked through the darkening sky, and night birds called from the pine woods. Sophia wrapped her shawl tighter against the cooling air, feeling the day's tensions slowly unknot. "My mother loved the stars," she said softly, surprising herself by speaking. "She taught me all their names before she got sick. Said they were God's way of reminding us there's beauty even in the dark." Sam nodded, his profile gentle in the fading light. Sarah felt the same. Used to sit out here many an evening, watching them come out one by one. He paused, then added quietly, "Been a while since I've done that myself." They sat in comfortable silence as more stars appeared, each one a pinpoint of light in the vast mountain sky. The evening air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke, mixing with the lingering warmth of the day. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. Sophia felt something shift inside her, like soil accepting a seed. This quiet moment, shared without demands or judgment, held more peace than she'd known in years. Sam's steady presence beside her spoke of safety, of the possibility that wounds could heal and new growth could take root. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and patient, as two lonely souls found comfort in their shared silence. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, more bread to bake, more whispers to face, more lessons to learn. But for now, the simple act of sitting together beneath the vast sky felt like the beginning of something precious and fragile, like the first green shoot breaking through winter soil. When the evening chill finally drove them inside, Sophia carried with her the memory of starlight and silence, of strength freely offered and gratefully received. She slept that night without dreams, anchored by the knowledge that she was no longer facing the world alone. The afternoon sun slanted through the cabin's windows as Sophia climbed the narrow stairs to the loft. Sam had mentioned storing extra quilts up there, and with autumn's chill settling in, she thought to air them out. The wooden steps creaked beneath her feet, each one worn smooth by years of use. Dust motes danced in the golden light that filtered through the small window. The loft smelled of cedar and thyme, a musty sweetness that reminded her of her mother's chest of keepsakes. Sophia moved carefully in the confined space, mindful of the sloped ceiling above. Several wooden trunks lined the walls, their brass fixtures dulled with age. She opened the nearest one, finding neatly folded quilts just as Sam had said. But it was the smaller trunk tucked in the corner that caught her eye, its leather surface softer, more personal somehow. Sophia hesitated, her hand hovering over the latch. This wasn't meant for her eyes, surely. Yet something about the trunk's careful placement spoke of treasured memories rather than secrets to hide. Inside, beneath a layer of carefully folded clothing, she found a leather-bound book wrapped in faded cotton cloth. The fabric felt soft against her fingers, worn by loving hands. When she unwrapped it, the journal's pages fell open naturally, as if remembering their reader's touch. The handwriting inside was delicate but clear, each entry dated and carefully penned. Sarah's words. Sophia's heart quickened. She should close it now, return it to its resting place. But a fragment of text caught her eye, and she found herself reading despite her misgivings. April 15th, 1873. Sam blames himself again, though I've told him time and again it's not his fault we haven't been blessed with a child. He carries such weight on his shoulders, my gentle giant. If only he could see what I see, that his worth isn't measured in sons and daughters, but in the boundless love he gives. Sophia's hands trembled as she read further. Sarah's voice rang clear through the years, speaking of Sam's quiet struggles, his fears that he was somehow lacking. The words painted a picture of a man wrestling with shame, yet never letting it harden his heart. June 3rd, 1873. Found Sam at the creek today praying again. He thinks I don't know how often he goes there, asking God to make him whole. If only he understood. He is whole, perfectly made, just as he is. His tenderness with the neighbor children shows what a father he would have been. Perhaps God has other plans for his generous heart. The sound of boots on the porch startled Sophia from her reading. Hastily, she rewrapped the journal and returned it to its trunk, her mind churning with what she'd learned. All through the afternoon's chores, Sarah's words echoed in her thoughts. As she prepared supper, stealing glances at Sam while he washed up at the pump outside, she saw him differently. His broad shoulders seemed to carry an invisible weight she hadn't noticed before. The gentle way he handled everything, from the nervous new calf to her own clumsy attempts at ranching, took on new meaning. The meal was simple: beans, cornbread, and the last of the summer's preserved peaches. They ate in companionable silence until Sophia found her courage. "I found something today," she said softly, setting down her fork. "In the loft. I know I shouldn't have read it, but..." She met his eyes across the table. "Sarah's journal." Sam went very still, his hand tightening on his cup. The lamp flame flickered between them, casting shadows that seemed to deepen the lines around his eyes. "I see," he said finally, his voice low and careful. "She wrote about your fears," Sophia continued gently. "About children. About thinking you were the cause." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the tick of the clock and the distant cry of a nighthawk. Sam's gaze dropped to his plate, then lifted again to meet hers with raw honesty. "Reckon some fears don't ever fully leave a man," he said. "Sarah and I tried for 5 years to have a child. Each month that passed, I watched hope die in her eyes. Blamed myself, though she never did." He pushed his plate aside, his hands folding together on the table. "Made a promise after she passed. If God ever saw fit to give me another chance at marriage, I'd never let shame poison it. Never let another woman feel less than precious, no matter if we had children or not." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, blurring the lamplight. "That's why you came that day. To my father's yard." Sam nodded slowly. "Heard talk in town about what your pa planned, about how he'd branded you barren, worthless. Made my blood run cold, hearing a father speak so of his own child." His voice roughened. "Knew right then what I had to do." The tears spilled over, tracking down Sophia's cheeks. She didn't try to hide them. I thought you just needed help with the ranch. I never imagined." "Sophia." Sam's voice was gentle as summer rain. "A woman's worth ain't measured in children any more than a man's is. Sarah taught me that, though it took years for me to believe it." He reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. "You're not worthless. Never were. Never will be." A sob caught in her throat. Sam rose from his chair and came around the table, drawing her up into his arms without hesitation. She buried her face against his chest, feeling the steady thump of his heart beneath her cheek. His embrace was careful, comforting without demanding, offering shelter without chains. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his shirt. "Sorry for reading something so personal. Sorry for your pain." "Nothing to be sorry for," he murmured. "Maybe it's time those words saw light again." Sarah would have wanted that, I reckon. She always did believe in healing through truth. They stood like that for a long moment, the lamp casting their joined shadow on the cabin wall. When Sophia's tears finally slowed, Sam led her to the chair by the fireplace, wrapping her in the quilt kept there. "Rest now," he said softly. "I'll tend to the dishes." Sophia watched through half-closed eyes as he moved about the kitchen, his movements sure and gentle in the lamplight. The revelation of his past pain, far from diminishing him, only made his kindness more remarkable. Here was a man who had taken his own suffering and turned it into compassion, his scars becoming wisdom. The fire's warmth and the quiet sounds of Sam's activity gradually lulled her toward sleep. Her last conscious thought was of Sarah's words about God having other plans for Sam's generous heart. Perhaps those plans included healing not just one wounded soul, but two. Sam's voice came to her, soft as a prayer. "Sleep well, Sophia." She drifted off, feeling safer, more understood than she had in years. The October afternoon wrapped the foothills in golden light, painting long shadows across the creek where Sophia knelt with her buckets. The water ran clear and cold over smooth stones, carrying the last fallen leaves downstream. She had grown stronger these past weeks. The buckets no longer made her arms tremble like they had when she first arrived. A sudden rustling in the brush across the creek made her pause, water sloshing against tin. At first, she thought it might be a deer. They often came to drink in the late afternoon. but the movement seemed too deliberate, too cautious. Sophia remained very still, her heart quickening as she watched the thicket of serviceberry bushes. There, a flash of dark fabric, quickly withdrawn. Someone was hiding there, watching her. "Hello?" she called softly, keeping her voice gentle. "It's all right. I won't hurt you." For a long moment, nothing moved. Then slowly, like a shadow taking shape, a small figure emerged from the brush. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. It was a girl, no more than 10 years old, with long black hair and eyes dark as creek stones. Her dress was worn but clean, and in her hands she clutched a freshly caught rabbit. The girl's features spoke of mixed heritage, the high cheekbones and copper skin of her Apache mother, softened by what must have been her white father's influence. But it was the wariness in her stance that made Sophia's heart ache. This child had learned to move through the world like a deer in hunting season, always ready to bolt. "Are you hungry?" Sophia asked, reaching slowly into her apron pocket. She drew out the piece of cornbread she'd wrapped for her own midday meal. "Here. It's still warm." The girl's eyes followed the movement, but she didn't step closer. Her fingers tightened on the rabbit. "My name is Sophia," she continued, breaking the cornbread in half and setting it on a flat stone near the water's edge. "I live up at the cabin with my husband Sam." "Do you have a name?" Still no response, but something flickered in those dark eyes. Recognition, perhaps, at the mention of Sam's name. He was known in these parts, respected even by the Apache for his fair dealings. "The rabbit's a good catch," Sophia tried again. "You must be skilled with snares." That earned her the briefest ghost of a smile, there and gone like a ripple in still water. But before Sophia could say more, a jay's harsh cry split the air. The girl vanished into the brush so quickly it seemed she'd never been there at all. Only the disturbed leaves marked her passing. Sophia sat back on her heels, listening to the fading rustle of the girl's retreat. Something about the encounter stirred deep emotions she'd thought long buried. Protective instincts, maternal yearnings she'd tried to forget after years of being called barren. She gathered her buckets with new purpose, mind already turning to what food she might leave by the creek. Something that would keep well, something to show the girl she was welcome. Over the next few days, Sophia found excuses to visit the creek more often. She left small offerings on the flat stone, biscuits wrapped in clean cloth, dried apple slices, once even a handful of hard candy she'd traded for in town. The food always disappeared, though she never caught sight of the girl taking it. It was nearly a week later when she appeared again. Sophia was hanging washing on the line behind the cabin, taking advantage of the bright autumn sun. Movement caught her eye. The girl stood at the edge of the clearing, half hidden behind a young pine. "Hello again," Sophia said warmly, continuing with her task so as not to spook her visitor. "I hoped you'd come back. Did you like the candies?" The girl took a small step forward, then another. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. "Maria. My name is Maria Nantan." Sophia smiled, careful not to show how her heart leaped at this small victory. "That's a beautiful name, Maria. Would you like to help me with these sheets? They're heavy when wet." Maria hesitated, then moved forward to take the other end of the damp sheet. Together they stretched it across the line, the girl's small brown hands careful with the clean fabric. They worked in companionable silence until the basket was empty. "I'm making stew for supper," Sophia said as they finished. "There's plenty if you'd like some." Fear flickered across Maria's face. "The man, your husband." "Sam won't mind," Sophia assured her, though in truth she wasn't certain. They had never discussed taking in strays, human or otherwise. "He's gentle, you'll see." It took more coaxing, but finally Maria followed her to the cabin's back door. The girl's posture remained tense, ready to flee, but the smell of cooking food drew her forward step by step. Sam's heavy tread on the porch nearly undid all Sophia's progress. Maria startled like a wild thing, but Sophia quickly stepped between them as her husband filled the doorway. "Sam," she said steadily, meeting his surprised gaze, "this is Maria Nantan. I've invited her for supper." Sam's expression remained carefully neutral as he took in the scene. The frightened girl, his wife's protective stance. Sophia held her breath, praying he would understand what she couldn't put into words, that this moment mattered more than she could say. Finally, he nodded, moving slowly to hang his hat by the door. "Any friend of my wife's is welcome at our table," he said simply. "I'll go wash up." Some of the tension left Maria's shoulders as Sam disappeared around the side of the house. Sophia guided her to a chair, her heart warming as the girl perched on its edge, watching everything with those keen, dark eyes. That evening unfolded like a flower opening to unexpected sunshine. Maria ate 3 bowls of stew, soaking up the broth with chunks of fresh bread. She spoke little, but her guard gradually lowered as Sam kept his movements slow and predictable, telling gentle stories about the ranch's animals between bites. When the sun began to set, Maria stood abruptly. "I must go." "Where do you stay?" Sophia couldn't help asking, though she feared the answer. "I have places." Maria's voice held a quiet dignity. "I know how to be safe." Sophia wanted to protest, to insist the girl stay where she could watch over her, but she recognized the independence in those young shoulders, the pride that had kept her alive this long. "You'll come back?" she asked instead. Maria paused at the door, glancing between them. "Tomorrow," she said finally. "I can help with more washing." After she disappeared into the gathering dusk, Sophia turned to face her husband. "Sam, He held up a hand, his expression soft. "No need to explain. I saw how you were with her, like a mother hen with a lost chick." He came to stand beside her, both of them looking out into the twilight. "She needs looking after. That's plain enough. We'll figure out the rest as we go." Gratitude and love welled up in Sophia's throat, making speech impossible. Instead, she leaned against his solid warmth, watching the first stars appear above the pine trees. That night, for the first time in years, Sophia knelt beside her bed to pray. The words came hesitantly at first, then with growing strength as she poured out her heart's concerns for the small, brave girl who had appeared like an answer to prayers she hadn't dared to speak. "Lord," she whispered into the darkness, "keep her safe until we can help her find her way home. And if home is meant to be here," she paused, hope trembling in her chest, "then help us be worthy of such a gift." The night wind whispered through the pines outside, carrying with it the cry of a distant coyote. Sophia remained on her knees for a long time, feeling the first stirrings of a mother's heart awakening within her, like seeds breaking ground after a long winter's sleep. Maria's presence at the Boone homestead grew as naturally as the wild roses that climbed the cabin's rear wall. At first, she would appear like morning mist, helping with a task before vanishing again. But as the days shortened and autumn's chill deepened, she lingered longer, drawn by Sophia's gentle patience and the steady meals that appeared at regular intervals. One crisp morning, Sophia found Maria already at work in the chicken coop, scattering feed with careful precision. The girl's clothes, though clean, hung loose on her thin frame. Sophia's heart ached at the sight. "Good morning," Sophia called softly, not wanting to startle her. "You're up early." Maria nodded, her dark eyes watchful but no longer frightened. The chickens were calling. They know when it's time. That they do. Sophia smiled, reaching into her apron pocket. "I've something for you." She pulled out a small slate and chalk. "Would you like to learn some new words while we work?" The girl's eyes lit up, though she tried to hide her eagerness. "I know many words already." "Of course you do," Sophia agreed. "But perhaps we could learn together. You could teach me some of your words, too." That earned her a rare smile. As they worked through the morning chores, Sophia would write simple words on the slate: egg, water, bread, and Maria would sound them out carefully. In return, Maria taught Sophia the Apache words for things around the homestead, her voice growing more confident with each exchange. Later that week, Maria offered to show Sophia how to set rabbit snares. They walked together along the creek, the girl pointing out signs Sophia would have missed: a tuft of fur here, a worn path there. "See how the branches bend?" Maria demonstrated, her small hands moving with surprising strength as she shaped a flexible sapling. "The rabbit thinks it's safe, but when it takes the bait," she let the motion explain the rest. Sophia watched, impressed by the girl's knowledge. "You've survived on your own for quite some time, haven't you?" Maria's hand stilled. "Since the winter. After my mother." She fell silent, focusing intently on adjusting the snare. Sophia didn't press. Instead, she gathered kindling while Maria set 2 more traps, letting the comfortable quiet speak for them both. When they returned to check the snares the next day and found a plump rabbit waiting, Maria's proud smile was worth more than gold. But their peaceful routine couldn't last forever. Word spread through town about the half-Apache girl often seen at the Boone place. Whispers turned to pointed looks when Sophia made her weekly trips for supplies. She tried to ignore them, but the weight of disapproving stares grew heavier with each visit. "Heard you're taking in strays now," Mrs. Peterson said one afternoon at the general store, her voice carrying deliberately. "Though I suppose when a woman can't have children of her own, she'll settle for just about anything." Sophia's hands trembled as she counted out coins for flour, but she held her head high. "Maria is a blessing to our home," she said clearly. "God's gifts come in unexpected ways." The whispers followed her all the way back to the wagon where Sam waited. He helped her up, his strong hands steady and sure. "Don't let them trouble you," he said quietly as they drove home. "They don't know what they're talking about." But the real confrontation came that Sunday. The little church was full, autumn sunlight streaming through its simple windows. Maria had stayed behind at the cabin, but her absence didn't spare them from Reverend Crane's attention. The preacher's voice rose and fell with practiced intensity as he reached the heart of his sermon. And what of those who would mock God's natural order? His gaze fixed deliberately on Sophia and Sam. Those who had taken the wild child, the heathen, pretending at parenthood in pale imitation of the Lord's true design? Murmurs rippled through the congregation. Sophia felt the heat of shame trying to climb her neck, but Sam's arm came around her shoulders, solid and unflinching. "Let us pray for those who in their barrenness seek to create unnatural unions," Reverend Crane continued, his voice heavy with false concern. "For surely they know not what they do, leading innocent souls astray from the path of righteousness." Sam stood then, his movement deliberate and controlled. Without a word, he helped Sophia to her feet and guided her toward the door. Their boots echoed on the wooden floor, a steady rhythm against the shocked silence. Just before they reached the exit, Sam paused. He turned, meeting the preacher's gaze with quiet authority. "Judge not, Reverend," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed church, "lest ye be judged." Then, he led Sophia out into the clear autumn morning. They rode home in silence, but Sam's arm remained around her, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. When they reached the cabin, Maria was waiting on the porch, her face anxious until she saw them smile. That evening, as shadows lengthened across the cabin floor, Maria helped Sophia prepare supper. The girl moved with more confidence now, knowing where things belonged, understanding the rhythm of the household. "Why do the town people not like me?" she asked suddenly, her voice small but direct. Sophia set down the potato she was peeling. "They're afraid of what they don't understand," she said carefully. "Some people think different means wrong." "Like how they talk about you?" Maria's dark eyes were knowing. "Because you have no babies?" The question might have hurt once, but Sophia found herself smiling. "Yes, like that. But they're wrong about both of us, aren't they?" Maria nodded solemnly. After a moment, she pressed against Sophia's side in a brief hug. "I like it here," she whispered. "With you and Sam. I feel safe." Sophia's heart swelled as she hugged the girl back. Here was fertility of a different kind, the growing of trust, the nurturing of a wounded spirit, the harvest of love freely given and received. Later, when the dishes were done and the evening chores complete, Maria curled up by the hearth with a blanket Sophia had made her. The firelight played across her peaceful face as she dozed, finally allowing herself to truly rest. Sam came to stand beside Sophia as they watched the sleeping girl. "Reckon some might call this unnatural," he said softly, "but I've never seen anything more right in all my days." Sophia leaned against him, feeling the truth of his words in her bones. The townsfolk could whisper, the preacher could scold, but here in this moment was something pure and real. A family forming like a spring discovering its course, finding its way home. The first snow of December draped Sam Boone's homestead in pristine white. Inside the cabin, warmth from the hearth pushed back against winter's chill, while 3 pairs of hands worked to welcome Christmas. Sophia sat in her rocking chair, a long thread strung between her fingers. Fresh cranberries from her autumn preserves made bright beads as she strung them one by one. The familiar motion reminded her of childhood Christmases, before bitterness had poisoned her father's heart. She hummed softly as she worked, an old carol her mother had taught her. Maria watched from her place on the floor, fascinated by the growing strand of red berries. "What are they for?" she asked, pausing in her own task of whittling a piece of pine wood. "We'll hang them on the tree," Sophia explained, holding up the string to check its length. "My mama always said the red berries remind us of God's love, bright against the dark green needles." The girl nodded thoughtfully, then returned to her carving. Wood shavings curled around her feet as she worked the knife carefully, just as Sam had taught her. Her tongue poked out slightly in concentration. "What are you making there?" Sophia asked, noting how the wood was taking shape under Maria's patient hands. "An angel," Maria replied without looking up, "like the ones you told about, who sang to the shepherds." Her small fingers traced the crude wings taking form. "Sam showed me how to hold the knife right so I won't cut myself." Sophia smiled, remembering how Sam had spent an entire evening teaching Maria proper knife safety before letting her try carving. His patience seemed endless, whether teaching woodcraft or reading, or the proper way to curry a horse. The cabin door opened with a burst of cold air as Sam himself stepped inside, stamping snow from his boots. A small fir tree was propped over his shoulder, its fresh scent filling the room. "Found us a good one," he announced, moving to set it up in the corner he'd cleared earlier. "Not too tall, but full and straight. Reckon it'll do just fine." Maria scrambled up to help, holding the trunk steady while Sam secured it in the stand he'd built. The tree's branches slowly relaxed, filling out after being bound for the journey home. "It's perfect," Sophia said, rising to run her fingers through the soft needles. The tree was indeed just right, tall enough to feel special, but not so grand as to seem prideful. Like everything about Sam, it was honest and true. They spent the afternoon decorating, with Maria standing on a chair to reach the higher branches. Sophia's cranberry strand wound around the tree like a scarlet ribbon, while small carved figures found homes among the boughs. Not just Maria's angel, but also wooden stars and hearts Sam had cut in the evenings leading up to Christmas. "Tell me again about the baby Jesus," Maria requested as she positioned her angel near the top, "about how his mama had to have him in a barn." Sophia exchanged a warm glance with Sam. The girl had been fascinated by the nativity story since first hearing it, especially the parts about the humble circumstances of Christ's birth. "Well," Sophia began, settling back in her rocker, "Mary and Joseph had to travel far from home, to a town called Bethlehem. When they got there, every inn was full, so they had to sleep in a stable." The short winter day faded into dusk as she told the familiar tale. Sam added wood to the fire and lit the oil lamp, its gentle glow mixing with the last rays of sunset through the windows. The smell of cornbread baking in the Dutch oven mingled with the pine scent of the tree. "Supper's about ready," Sam announced when Sophia finished the story. "Maria, would you help set the table?" The girl nodded eagerly, carefully laying out their 3 plates and spoons. She'd learned where everything belonged, taking pride in being useful. Sophia rose to check the venison stew simmering in its pot, adding a pinch more salt and stirring carefully. They gathered around the table, steam rising from their bowls. Sam bowed his head to pray, his deep voice steady and sure. "Lord, we thank you for this food, for this shelter from the storm, and most especially for the gift of family. Bless this meal and these dear ones gathered here. Amen." "Amen," Sophia and Maria echoed softly. The stew was rich and warm, the cornbread golden. They ate contentedly while snow began falling outside, big flakes drifting past the windows. Maria told them about the tracks she'd found in the morning snow, rabbit and fox, deer and squirrel, demonstrating her growing knowledge of woodland ways. After the dishes were cleared and dried, Sam reached for the family Bible kept on the shelf. "Reckon it's time to read the Christmas story proper," he said, settling into his chair by the fire. "Maria, would you like to try reading some yourself? You've been practicing mighty well." The girl's face lit up as she moved to sit at Sam's feet. Sophia brought her mending basket and sat opposite them, watching as Sam opened to the Gospel of Luke. Maria leaned forward, her finger following the lines as Sam helped her sound out the words. And it came to pass in those days, she read slowly but clearly, that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus. When the words grew too difficult, Sam would read a passage, then let Maria try again. The familiar verses filled the cabin like music: the journey to Bethlehem, the crowded inn, the humble manger, the glorious announcement to the shepherds. Outside, the snow fell thicker, but inside was all warmth and light. As they finished reading, Sophia found herself humming again. Sam looked up with a smile. "How about a carol or two before bed?" Maria clapped her hands, the one about angels singing. So they sang together, their voices blending in the quiet room. "Hark, the herald angels sing" was followed by "Silent Night," then "Joy to the World." Maria knew some words and made up others, but her clear voice carried the melody true. When the songs ended, they sat quietly watching the fire. Maria leaned against Sophia's knee, her eyes growing heavy. The snow hushed the world outside their windows, wrapping the cabin in peace. "Thank you," Sophia whispered, not wanting to break the spell but needing to speak. "For this. For everything." Sam reached across and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. No words were needed. The quiet touch said everything about belonging and becoming family. Maria was already asleep, her face softened in the firelight. Sam carefully lifted her and laid her on the blanket they'd spread near the hearth, as had become their custom on cold nights. Sophia tucked another blanket around the girl's shoulders, smoothing back her dark hair. They settled on either side of Maria, watching the fires dance across the rough-hewn walls. The decorated tree stood sentinel in its corner, cranberries gleaming like tiny flames. Outside, the storm might rage, but here was shelter. Here was home. Sophia felt her own eyes growing heavy as she listened to Maria's steady breathing and Sam's deeper rhythms. Her last thought before sleep took her was a prayer of gratitude, not just for the day's simple joys, but for this precious gift of family found in the most unexpected way. Like the Holy Family in the story they'd read, they had created something sacred in humble circumstances, love burning brighter than any storm. The fire settled lower, casting its warm glow over the sleeping forms before it, man, woman, and child, wrapped in peace and possibility. Christmas Eve became Christmas Day as they slept, while hope glowed steady as the embers and snow continued falling soft and clean in the dark. The peaceful days after Christmas dissolved like morning frost in harsh sunlight. On a bitter January afternoon, the crack of hooves on frozen ground drew Sam to the front porch. 3 riders approached, their dark coats stark against the snow-covered landscape. The lead rider, a well-dressed man with a sleek city hat, pulled his horse to a stop in the yard. "Mr. Boone," the man called out, removing his hat with practiced courtesy. "Horace Pike, representing the Western Railroad Company. May we discuss a business proposition?" Sam's jaw tightened, but he stepped down from the porch. Sophia watched from the doorway as the men dismounted, their polished boots crunching in the snow. Maria pressed close to her side, silent but watchful. "Your land," Pike continued, producing papers from his satchel, "lies along our planned expansion route. The company is prepared to offer fair compensation for the right-of-way." "Not interested," Sam said flatly. "This land's been in my family since before the war. I aim to keep it that way." Pike's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Progress can't be stopped, Mr. Boone. The railroad brings prosperity to all. Surely you want what's best for your family." His gaze flickered to Sophia and Maria in the doorway, the pause carrying clear insult. Sam took a step forward, his shadow falling across Pike. "My answer's no. Now kindly remove yourselves from my property." "Consider carefully," Pike said, his tone hardening. "Accidents happen to those who stand in progress's way, particularly those with questionable domestic arrangements." Sam's hands curled into fists, but he held his ground. "Good day, gentlemen." The riders mounted up, Pike's companions glaring as they turned their horses. At the edge of the yard, Pike called back, "We'll be in touch, Mr. Boone. Do think about what you have to lose." Sophia's heart hammered as Sam watched them ride away. When he turned back, his face was grim. "Bar the doors tonight," he said quietly. "I'll check the barn." That evening, they ate in uneasy silence. Even Maria seemed subdued, pushing her food around her plate. The threat hung in the air like smoke, making the familiar cabin feel suddenly vulnerable. Near midnight, the dog's frantic barking jerked them awake. Through the window, orange light painted the sky. Sam was already pulling on his boots as Sophia gasped. "The hay barn!" "Stay inside," he ordered, grabbing his coat. But Sophia couldn't just watch. She ran for the water pump while Sam sprinted toward the burning barn, its doors thrown wide to feed the flames. Maria filled buckets as fast as her small hands could work the pump. Sophia formed a line between them and Sam, passing full buckets up and empty ones back. The night air burned their lungs as they worked, smoke stinging their eyes. Hour after terrible hour, they fought the fire. When dawn finally broke, the hay barn stood scorched but standing. Inside, half their winter feed lay in sodden, smoking ruins. Sam's face was streaked with soot as he surveyed the damage. "Pike's warning," he said grimly. "This is just the start." Sophia touched his arm. "We'll manage. We can buy more hay." "With what money?" Sam's voice was heavy. "Between the drought and paying off your father, our reserves are thin. And now," Maria appeared with a dipper of fresh water. Sam managed a tired smile for her, but Sophia saw the worry in his eyes. Without enough feed, the cattle would suffer. Their very livelihood was at stake. The next day, Sam rode into town to report the arson. Sophia kept Maria close, jumping at every sound. When Sam returned that evening, his expression told her everything. "Sheriff claims there's no proof," he said, hanging up his coat. "Says it was probably sparks from our own chimney." He laughed bitterly. "As if I don't know the difference between accident and malice." But worse was to come. On Sunday, they walked into church to find Reverend Crane already at his pulpit, his severe gaze fixing upon them. The usual greeting hymn died away as he raised his hand for silence. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice carrying to every corner, "we must address the matter of irregular unions in our community. Those who mock the sacred bonds of matrimony by living in alternative arrangements, etc." Sophia felt the congregation's eyes turn to them. Maria pressed closer to her side, while Sam's arm tightened protectively around them both. "A true wife," Crane continued, "brings forth fruit. She multiplies her husband's house with children, as God commanded. Those who cannot, or will not, fulfill this holy duty make a mockery of marriage itself." The words struck Sophia like physical blows. She heard whispers ripple through the church. Barren, no true wife, living in sin. Memories of her father's cruel words rose up, threatening to drown her. But Sam was already standing, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Come on," he said quietly, helping Sophia to her feet. "We'll worship at home today." They walked out with heads high, but Sophia's heart was heavy. Outside, Maria tugged at her skirt. "Why did the preacher man say mean things? Aren't you and Papa Sam married proper?" "Of course they are," Sam answered before Sophia could speak. "Some folks just can't see past their own narrow minds." But the damage was done. In the days that followed, Sophia noticed how women pulled their children away when she passed in town, how the shopkeeper's wife counted her change 3 times, as if expecting theft from one living in sin. The final blow came when Maria returned from the creek one afternoon, tears streaming down her face. She'd gone to fill the water bucket and found several town children there. They'd taunted her, calling Sophia barren and cursed, saying no decent woman would take in a half-breed child. They said you're not a real mama," Maria sobbed as Sophia held her, "that you only took me because you can't have babies of your own." "Oh, sweetheart." Sophia rocked her gently, fighting back her own tears. "Love makes a family, not blood. You are my daughter in every way that matters." But that night, after Maria was asleep, Sophia stood at the window watching the stars. Sam's promise echoed in her memory. "I will make you fertile again, not with cruelty, but with care." Had it been empty words? Was she truly cursed, as everyone said? She heard Sam's step behind her but couldn't turn to face him. "Maybe they're right," she whispered. "Maybe I am barren ground, good for nothing but shame." "No." Sam's voice was firm as he turned her to face him. "You're worth more than all their narrow minds put together. Look what you've done already. Made this house a home. Given Maria love and safety she never knew. That's the truest fertility I know." Sophia buried her face in his chest, letting his strength shore up her crumbling faith. But deep inside, doubt gnawed like winter frost. The rail company had struck at their livelihood, while the preacher attacked their very right to be a family. How much more could they withstand before something broke beyond mending? Outside, the wind keened around the cabin corners, and somewhere in the darkness, coyotes began to howl. The sound carried loss and loneliness, echoing the fears Sophia couldn't quite silence. She held tighter to Sam, praying her grip on hope wouldn't slip away with the passing of these dark hours. The pale winter sun had barely crested the eastern hills when hoofbeats thundered into the yard. Sophia looked up from stirring the morning porridge, her heart skipping at the sound of Maria's frightened gasp. "Papa Sam," the girl cried, pressing against the window. Through the frosted glass, blue uniforms materialized in the dawn light. 6 cavalry soldiers sat astride their mounts, rifles gleaming. At their head, a stern-faced officer held up an official-looking document. Sam was already moving, positioning himself between the door and his family. "Stay inside," he ordered quietly. But Sophia followed him onto the porch, her hand finding Maria's trembling shoulders. The officer dismounted, his spurs jingling against the frozen ground. "Samuel Boone?" His voice carried the clipped tones of Eastern education. "That's right." Sam's reply was measured, careful. "I am Lieutenant Wallace, United States Army." The officer thrust the paper forward. "We have orders to collect the Apache child known as Maria for placement in the Fort Lyon Indian Mission School." Sophia's grip tightened on Maria's shoulders. "No," she whispered. "She's our daughter," Sam said firmly. "We're caring for her properly." Lieutenant Wallace's expression hardened. "The law requires all Indian children to receive proper Christian education. The mission school will civilize her, teach her useful skills." "She's learning plenty right here," Sophia interrupted, her voice rising. "Reading, writing, scripture." "Ma'am, this isn't a request." Wallace nodded to his men, who began dismounting. "The child comes with us. Now." Maria whimpered, pressing closer to Sophia. "Mama, please don't let them." "You can't take her." Sophia's cry echoed across the yard. "She's ours. We love her." 2 soldiers advanced up the porch steps, Sam's hands clenched into fists, but the lieutenant's meaningful glance at the rifles still held by mounted men made him hesitate. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Wallace said coldly. The soldiers reached for Maria. She screamed, clinging to Sophia's skirts. "No! Mama! Papa!" Sophia lunged forward, trying to shield the girl with her body. "She's my daughter." "You can't." Strong arms caught her as Sam pulled her back. She fought against his grip, watching helplessly as the soldiers pried Maria's fingers loose. The girl's terrified sobs tore through the morning air. "Sam, do something," Sophia begged. Please." His voice was thick with restrained fury. "If I fight them now, they'll shoot us both." "Then who will help her?" Maria kicked and struggled as the soldiers carried her down the steps. Her dark eyes locked on Sophia's face. "Mama, don't let them take me." "We'll come for you," Sophia called desperately. "Maria, we'll find a way, we promise." The soldiers lifted the crying child onto a horse. Lieutenant Wallace mounted up, adjusting his gloves with precise movements. "The mission school will inform you of permitted visiting days." "Good day." They wheeled their horses around, Maria's continued screams growing fainter as they rode away. Only when the sound had faded completely did Sam's arms loosen. Sophia collapsed against him, her own sobs breaking free at last. "How could they?" she choked out. "She's just a little girl, our little girl." Sam's chest heaved with barely contained emotion. "They think they're doing right. Saving her soul by stealing her from people who love her." Sophia pulled away, wiping furiously at her tears. "We have to get her back. We have to do something." "We will," Sam's voice was grim. "But not with guns. That's what they expect. What they want. Give them excuse to arrest me, maybe hang me? No, we'll fight this their way. Through the law." "The law?" Sophia laughed bitterly. "The law that lets them steal children from their homes?" "There are other laws, other courts." Sam took her shoulders gently. "I promise you, Sophia, we won't abandon her." but his words, usually so comforting, felt hollow in the awful silence of the yard. Sophia stared at the empty porch where Maria had stood just moments before. The girl's half-finished breakfast still sat on the table inside, getting cold. Her worn leather moccasins remained by the door, waiting for feet that wouldn't fill them. The day crawled by in a fog of grief. Sophia moved through her chores mechanically, tears falling as she found traces of Maria everywhere. A crude drawing tucked in a book, a doll made from corn husks, small fingerprints in the dust on the windowsill. Each discovery was like a knife to her heart. Sam rode into town seeking help from the lawyer who'd handled their marriage papers. He returned at dusk, his face drawn with frustration. "He says it's federal law," Sam reported heavily. "The Indian Civilization Act gives them authority to take any native child for proper education, even half-blood children like Maria." "But she was learning here," Sophia protested. "She can already write her name, knows her letters. We've been teaching her about God's love." "They don't care about that." Sam's voice was bitter. "They want to erase everything Indian about her, make her forget her mother's people, her language, even her name probably." Sophia sank into a chair, remembering Maria's pride when she'd taught them Apache words for animals and plants. The way the girl's face lit up sharing stories her mother had told her. "They'll break her spirit." "Not if we can help it." Sam knelt beside her chair. "The lawyer's looking into options. Says there might be ways to petition for guardianship, especially since she's half white. Meanwhile, we can visit her when they allow it. Show her she's not alone." But Sophia could only see Maria's terrified face as they'd torn her away. The sound of her screams echoed in memory, drowning out Sam's attempts at comfort. When night fell, the cabin's shadows seemed deeper than ever before. Unable to sleep, Sophia rose and went to Maria's small room. The girl's bed was still rumpled where she'd jumped up that morning, excited to help collect eggs. Her treasured possessions remained scattered about. Pretty rocks from the creek, a string of painted beads, the wooden angel she'd carved for Christmas. Sophia sank onto the narrow bed, clutching Maria's pillow to her chest. The faint scent of pine needles and sweet grass still clung to it. Maria had stuffed her pillow with them, saying it helped her dream of the mountains. Now those dreams would take place in some cold dormitory surrounded by strangers who saw her heritage as something to be scrubbed away. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. Sophia buried her face in the pillow, trying to muffle her sobs. But they tore free anyway, years of pain rising up to join this fresh grief. Her father's cruelty, the townspeople's scorn, and now this deepest cut of all. She felt rather than heard Sam's approach. His hand came to rest on her shoulder, and when she looked up, she saw tears tracking down his weathered cheeks as well. "I should have stopped them," he said hoarsely. "Should have found some way." "No." Sophia reached for his hand. "You were right. Getting yourself killed wouldn't help her." "Doesn't make it hurt less." Sam's fingers tightened on hers. "Watching them take her, hearing her cry for us. I've never felt so helpless. Not since Sarah died." The raw admission startled Sophia. Sam rarely spoke of his late wife. That he would compare this loss to her death showed how deeply Maria had worked her way into his heart. "I keep thinking about what they'll do to her," Sophia whispered. "Cut her hair, punish her for speaking Apache, make her ashamed of who she is. She's so proud of her mother's people, Sam. It'll kill something in her to deny that." "Then we'll help her remember." Sam's voice grew stronger. "Every chance we get will remind her she's loved, that she has nothing to be ashamed of. They can't take away what's in her heart unless she lets them." Sophia nodded, but fresh tears spilled over. The cabin feels so empty without her. No little footsteps, no laughter. How can so much silence hurt so much? Sam gathered her close, his own breath hitching. For a long while they simply held each other, sharing their helpless fury and heartache. Outside, a coyote's lonely call floated through the darkness, as if nature itself mourned the absence of one small girl who had known its secrets. Finally, exhaustion dragged at Sophia's limbs. Sam helped her to her feet, but she couldn't bear to leave Maria's room just yet. She straightened the rumpled blanket, tucked the corn-husk doll carefully onto the pillow. Small gestures of love for a child who wasn't there to see them. "We'll get her back," Sam promised again as they stood in the doorway. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes, She's our daughter." Sophia leaned against him, drawing strength from his certainty. But as they walked to their own room, the empty silence of the cabin pressed in around them. Each creaking board, each whisper of wind seemed to echo Maria's absence. Even their prayers that night felt incomplete, missing the small voice that had so recently joined them in saying, "Amen." The morning after Maria was taken dawned gray and lifeless. Sophia stood at the kitchen window, watching frost creep across the glass like delicate spider webs. The familiar sounds of the ranch seemed muffled, as if the world itself mourned their loss. She mechanically gathered eggs from the henhouse, remembering how Maria would count them in both English and Apache, her small fingers carefully placing each one in the basket. Now there was only silence, broken by the occasional cluck of a nervous hen. Inside, the kitchen felt too large, too empty. Sophia cracked eggs into a bowl, her movements slow and distant. The third egg slipped from her trembling fingers, shattering on the floor. Yellow yolk spread across the wooden boards like spilled sunshine. Maria would have already grabbed a rag to help clean up, maybe giggling at the mess. But there was no cheerful voice, no eager helper, just the sound of egg dripping between the floorboards. Sophia sank to her knees, pressing her forehead against the cool wood of a cabinet. The grief rose up like a wave, threatening to drown her. She forced herself to breathe, to focus on the simple task of cleaning up the broken egg, one motion at a time. That was all she could manage now. Sam's boots scraped on the porch outside. He entered quietly, removing his hat. His eyes were shadowed, face drawn with exhaustion. He'd been up before dawn, riding the fence line, though they both knew it was just an excuse to avoid the empty breakfast table. "Coffee's ready," Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't bring herself to speak normally. It would only emphasize the missing voice between them. Sam nodded, pouring a cup but not drinking. He stood at the window, staring out at the mountains where dawn painted the snow peaks pink. His shoulders were rigid with tension. "Did you check the creek crossing?" Sophia asked, desperate to fill the silence with ordinary things. "Yeah." Sam's reply was clipped. He set down his untouched coffee and moved toward the door. "Got work to do in the barn." Sophia watched him go, noting the stiffness in his stride. She recognized the fury building in him, had seen it in the way he'd barely slept, in how his hands clenched whenever they passed Maria's empty room. The morning crept by. Sophia forced herself through her chores, feeding chickens, kneading bread, sweeping floors that felt too clean without muddy little footprints. Each task was both blessing and torment. The routine helped numb her mind, but every corner held memories that sliced at her heart. Around noon, she carried lunch out to the barn. The sound that greeted her made her blood run cold. Shick, shick, shick. The steady rhythm of steel on whetstone echoed in the shadowy space. Sam sat on a hay bale, methodically sharpening his rifle's bayonet. His face was set in hard lines she'd never seen before. "Sam," her voice quavered. He didn't look up, just kept working the blade against stone. "Shick, shick, shick. And what are you doing?" "What needs doing?" His voice was flat, dangerous. "They took our girl, Sophia. Took her like thieves in the night. Army or no army, they had no right." The plate trembled in Sophia's hands. "You're not thinking of..." "Of what?" "Taking back what's ours." Now he did look up, and the cold rage in his eyes frightened her. "Why not?" "They used force on us. Maybe force is all they understand." "Sam, no." Sophia set down the plate and moved closer, though her instinct screamed to back away from the darkness radiating from him. "You can't." "Can't I?" The whetstone scraped faster. "I've seen men die before, Sophia. Seen what steel and lead can do. Didn't enjoy it, but sometimes violence is the only language left." "Stop." Sophia's voice cracked. "Please stop." But Sam continued as if she hadn't spoken. "I could do it. Slip in at night, cut her loose. We'd be in Mexico before they knew she was gone. Plenty of places to hide there." "And then what?" Sophia knelt before him, forcing him to meet her eyes. "We live as fugitives? Maria grows up watching over her shoulder? That's no life for a child. Better than having her spirit broken by those people." The whetstone's rhythm grew more aggressive. "You don't know what those schools are like. They'll beat her language out of her, cut off her hair, teach her to hate everything about herself." "I know." Sophia's voice shook with her own pain. I know it's horrible, but violence won't save her, Sam. It'll only destroy everything we've built, everything we've taught her about faith and doing right. The Whetstone's motion slowed but didn't stop. Sometimes a man has to choose between what's right and what's legal. No. Sophia covered his hands with hers, stilling their movement. Remember what you promised me? That first night, in the wagon? You said you'd make me fertile again, not with cruelty but with care. Sam's fingers twitched beneath hers. You kept that promise, she continued softly. You showed me that true fertility isn't just about bearing children. It's about growing love, hope, faith. Violence would poison all of that. Make us as barren as my father's cruel heart. The Whetstone clattered to the floor. Sam's shoulders began to shake. I can't bear it, he whispered. Can't bear knowing she's suffering, calling for us. Every night I hear her screams in my dreams. I know. Sophia rose on her knees, drawing his head down to her shoulder. I hear them too. But we have to be strong for her. Show her that love is stronger than hate, that faith can overcome fear. Sam's arms went around her, clutching tight. She felt hot tears soak into her dress. What do we do then? He asked hoarsely. How do we help her? We pray. Sophia stroked his hair, her own tears falling. We pray like we've never prayed before. And we trust that God hasn't abandoned her, or us. Slowly, Sam's grip loosened. He pulled back, wiping roughly at his eyes. The murderous rage had faded, leaving grief and exhaustion in its wake. Will you pray with me? Sophia asked quietly. Right here, right now. Sam looked at the rifle propped against the hay bale, then back at her. After a long moment, he nodded. They knelt together on the barn's dirt floor, hands clasped. Sophia's voice trembled but grew stronger as she prayed. Lord, we bring you our broken hearts, our anger, our fear, our helplessness. We don't understand why this happened, but we trust you haven't forgotten Maria. Watch over her, protect her spirit. Give us wisdom to help her in ways that honor you, and please, please show us a path through this darkness. Amen, Sam whispered. Then more firmly, Amen. They remained kneeling, drawing strength from each other's presence. Outside, winter wind sighed through pine branches. Inside the barn, peace gradually replaced despair. Finally, Sam stood, helping Sophia to her feet. He picked up the rifle, examining it for a long moment before hanging it back on its pegs. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Got lost in the dark for a while there. We all do sometimes. Sophia squeezed his hand. That's why we need each other. To lead us back to the light. They walked back to the house together, shoulders touching. The day was still gray. The silence still ached. But something had shifted. Hope, fragile as a candle flame, flickered in the shadows. They were just finishing a simple supper when hoofbeats approached. Sam went to the door, hand instinctively moving toward his gun belt before dropping away. A young boy from the telegraph office sat atop a winded pony waving a yellow paper. Message for Mr. Boone, from Pueblo. Sam took the telegram, pressing a coin into the boy's hand. Sophia stood in the doorway, heart pounding as Sam unfolded the paper. His eyes widened as he read. It's from Judge Blackwell. Says he's heard about Maria's situation. Wants to see us. Says he might be able to help. Sophia grabbed his arm. Judge Blackwell? The one who ruled against the railroad last year? Sam nodded, hope kindling in his eyes. Known for being fair-minded. Treats Indians like people, not property. He read further. Says he'll hear our case if we can get to Pueblo by next week. Then we'll go. Sophia's voice was firm. We'll tell him everything. How Maria came to us. How we've cared for her. He has to understand. It's a start. Sam pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. A legal way to fight back. You were right. This is better than violence. Sophia closed her eyes, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and pine that clung to Sam's shirt. We'll need to leave soon. It's a 3-day ride to Pueblo. Longer if the weather turns. We'll start preparations tomorrow. Sam's arms tightened around her. Pack warm clothes, extra food. The mountains are treacherous this time of year. But even as they discussed practical details, their hearts lifted. The telegram represented more than just a legal hearing. It was an answer to prayer, a sign that they hadn't been abandoned to their grief. That night, for the first time since Maria was taken, they slept soundly. Outside, stars pierced the winter darkness like pinpricks of hope. Inside, two hearts beat stronger together, united in purpose and faith. Tomorrow they would begin their journey to Pueblo, carrying with them the love of a family that transcended blood, a love that might just be fertile enough to bring their daughter home. Dawn broke crisp and cold as Sam and Sophia hitched the team to their wagon. Frost sparkled on the harness leather, and their breath clouded in the pale morning light. They had spent days preparing, checking axles, packing provisions, and gathering warm blankets for the arduous journey to Pueblo. "Weather's holding," Sam said, testing the traces one final time. "But we'd best make good time before another storm rolls in." Sophia nodded, clutching her shawl tight against the biting wind. She had barely slept, her thoughts full of Maria and the judge who might help bring her home. The empty cabin behind them seemed to watch their departure with lonely eyes. Sam helped Sophia onto the wagon seat, his strong hands gentle at her waist. She settled beside him, drawing comfort from his solid presence as he clucked to the horses. The wagon wheels creaked into motion, leaving fresh tracks in the glittering frost. The first few hours passed in companionable silence as they wound their way down from the foothills. Sophia watched the familiar landmarks slip away, the lightning-struck pine that marked their property line, the creek where she had first met Maria, the rocky outcrop where wild roses bloomed in summer. Each sight tugged at her heart with memories. As the sun climbed higher, the terrain grew more challenging. The trail narrowed, hemmed in by steep walls of rock. Recent snow had drifted in places, forcing Sam to guide the team carefully around treacherous patches of ice. "Pass ahead's the worst part," he said, squinting at the white-capped peaks. "Snow's likely deep up there. Might have to dig our way through in spots." Sophia touched the small Bible in her pocket, drawing strength from its presence. "We'll manage. We have to." The wagon climbed steadily through the morning, the horses' hooves finding purchase on the rocky trail. By midday, they had reached the start of the pass. Snow lay thick between the towering pines, pristine except for the tracks of deer and mountain lions. Sam halted the team to rest and water them from a stream that still ran beneath the ice. While the horses drank, Sophia unpacked bread and dried beef for their own meal. They ate quickly, stamping their feet to keep warm. "Should make it through the worst of the pass by nightfall," Sam said, brushing crumbs from his beard. "Know a good camping spot in a protected hollow, if we can reach it." The afternoon proved grueling. Twice they had to stop and dig through deep snowdrifts, their shoulders aching from wielding heavy shovels. The cold crept through their clothes despite their layers, and the wind picked up, driving icy particles into their faces. But they pressed on, taking turns walking beside the wagon to lighten the load on the steepest sections. Sophia's legs burned from trudging through the deep snow, but she refused Sam's offers to ride. This journey was their shared burden, their shared purpose. The sun was setting when they finally reached the hollow Sam had mentioned. Protected by a natural windbreak of rock, the small clearing offered enough space for the wagon and a campfire. They worked together efficiently, Sam tending to the tired horses while Sophia gathered firewood and cleared a space for their bedrolls. Soon a cheerful fire crackled, pushing back the gathering darkness. Sophia prepared a simple supper of beans and coffee, while Sam made one final check of the animals. When he returned, she handed him a steaming tin cup. "Thank you, wife," he said softly. The word, still new between them, warmed her more than the coffee. They sat close together, watching the flames dance. The stars emerged one by one, brilliant in the crystal-clear mountain air. An owl called somewhere in the darkness, its cry echoing off the rocks. "I keep thinking about Maria," Sophia said after a while, her voice barely above a whisper. "Wondering if she's warm enough, if anyone's being kind to her." Sam's hand found hers across the firelight, his calloused fingers wrapping around her smaller ones. "She's strong, like her mother." Sophia's breath caught at the word mother. She turned to look at him, firelight reflecting in her eyes. "Do you really think of me that way? As her mother?" "Course I do," Sam squeezed her hand. "Seen how you are with her, teaching, protecting, loving. That's what makes a mother, not just bearing a child." Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks, glinting in the firelight. I never thought I'd feel this way. All those years of being called barren, worthless, but with Maria, something just opened up inside me, like a flower blooming after a long winter. That's what I meant that first night, Sam said quietly, about making you fertile again. Wasn't talking about your body, but your heart. Knew it just needed the right kind of tending. Sophia leaned against his shoulder, letting his warmth seep into her bones. I was so afraid that night. Thought you'd be just like my father. Cruel, demanding. Instead, you gave me space to grow, to heal. Had some healing to do myself, Sam admitted. After losing Sarah, thought my heart was done, dried up like summer creek bed. Then you came along, you and Maria both. Brought the water back, so to speak. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in thought as the fire burned lower. The horses nickered softly in their makeshift picket, and somewhere a coyote yipped at the moon. Tell me about the children you dreamed of having, Sophia said suddenly. Before you thought you couldn't. Sam was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was rough with memory. Used to imagine a whole passel of them, boys to help with the ranch, girls to brighten the house with their laughter. Sarah and I had names picked out for the first 3. He paused, clearing his throat. When none came well, started thinking maybe God had other plans. Maybe some men weren't meant to be fathers. And now? Now I reckon God's plans were bigger than my understanding? He turned to look at her, his eyes soft in the dying firelight. Brought me a daughter through you, didn't he? Different than I imagined, but no less precious. Sophia's heart swelled with love. For this good man, for their lost girl, for the family they were building despite all odds. We'll get her back, Sam. Whatever it takes. It's that we will. He pulled her closer, sharing his warmth as the night grew colder. Should get some rest. Still got a fair piece to travel tomorrow. They banked the fire and settled into their bedrolls, positioned close together for warmth. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and unchanging, while below 2 hearts beat in rhythm with a shared purpose. Dawn came early, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of rose and gold. They ate a quick breakfast of cold biscuits and coffee, then hitched up the team. The horses were fresh after their night's rest, their breath steaming in the morning air. The second day's travel proved easier than the first. The trail descended steadily from the pass, and the snow grew patchy as they lost elevation. By mid-morning, they could see the plains stretching out below them, and in the distance, the smoke from Pueblo's chimneys. Sophia sat straighter on the wagon seat, hope rising in her chest. Each mile brought them closer to the judge who might help them bring Maria home. Each turn in the trail felt like a step toward making their family whole again. Sam must have sensed her thoughts, for he reached over and took her hand, just as he had across the firelight. Together, they drove on toward Pueblo, toward justice, toward hope. The sun was climbing toward noon when they finally rolled into town, their wagon dust-covered and their bodies weary, but their spirits undiminished. The streets were busy with Saturday traffic, shoppers, traders, and townfolk going about their business. Sam guided the team toward the livery stable, where they would board the horses until their business with the judge was concluded. Sophia watched the bustling town with tired but determined eyes. Somewhere in one of these solid brick buildings, a judge waited who might understand that family was more than blood, that love could bridge any divide. As Sam helped her down from the wagon, she caught his eye and saw her own determination reflected there. They had traveled through snow and cold, through memories both painful and healing, and arrived stronger together than when they'd started. The journey had forged something new between them, not just husband and wife, but partners in a sacred purpose. Whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced the mountain pass, side by side, step by step, their hearts beating with shared love for the daughter waiting to come home. The territorial courthouse hummed with tension as Sam stood before Judge Blackwell. His voice carried clear and strong through the packed room as he detailed the rail company's attempts to steal his land through the forged documents. When Sophia's turn came, she rose on trembling legs. Her quiet voice grew steadier as she described finding Maria by the creek, teaching her to read, and sharing meals together. She brought life back to our home, Sophia said, her eyes bright with tears. The rail company's lawyer sneered. And what qualifies a barren woman to be any kind of mother? Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but before Judge Blackwell could respond, an elderly Apache man stood in the gallery. His weathered face was dignified as he addressed the court in careful English. Among my people, a mother is one who feeds the hungry child, who teaches with patience, who protects with courage, he said. This woman has done all these things. The spirits know true motherhood when they see it. Sophia's heart swelled as several heads nodded in agreement. The judge's expression remained grave as he listened to more witnesses clash over Maria's fate. Finally, he raised his gavel. This matter requires careful consideration, he declared. Court will reconvene tomorrow morning for my decision. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the courthouse windows as Judge Blackwell settled into his chair. The room fell silent, packed with townsfolk, rail agents, and those who had ridden miles to hear the verdict. Having weighed all testimony, the judge began, his voice firm and measured. I find in favor of Samuel Boone. His land rights are hereby confirmed as legal and binding. He paused, turning his stern gaze to the matter of Maria. Furthermore, I grant guardianship of the child Maria Nantan to Sophia Boone, finding her a fit and proper mother in all ways that matter. The courtroom erupted. Rail agents stormed out, slamming doors. Several townspeople cheered, while others muttered darkly. Circuit Preacher Crane, who had testified against them, slipped away through a side door, his shoulders hunched in shame. Outside on the courthouse steps, Maria broke free from the mission school matron and flew into Sophia's waiting arms. Mama, she whispered, burying her face in Sophia's skirts. Sam wrapped his strong arms around them both. That evening, back at their cabin, they gathered around the familiar table. Steam rose from bowls of rabbit stew as Sam offered a prayer of thanksgiving. Sophia watched Maria sop up gravy with cornbread, her heart full of quiet joy. Justice had prevailed and their family was whole again. The March winds gentled as winter's grip loosened its hold on the foothills. Patches of green began peeking through melting snow, and the creek ran full with spring thaw. Sophia hummed as she pinned sheets to the line, enjoying the fresh breeze. Maria sat nearby, weaving a small basket from creek willows. The world felt right, settled in its proper place at last. Without warning, the yard tilted sideways. Sophia grabbed the clothesline as dizziness swept over her. The wooden pins scattered across the muddy ground as her knees buckled. Sam! Maria's cry brought him running from the barn. He scooped Sophia into his arms, his face tight with worry, and carried her inside to their bed. I'll fetch Doc Wilson, he said, already reaching for his coat. The doctor arrived within the hour, his examination thorough but gentle. Finally, he sat back with a knowing smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Mrs. Boone, you're carrying a child. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. Sam sank into the bedside chair, tears gleaming in his eyes. That evening, after Maria was asleep, Sam sat beside Sophia on the porch swing. He held her hand in his calloused one, his voice rough with emotion. The Lord has kept my promise truer than I ever dreamed. Sophia leaned against his shoulder and wept, her tears of pure joy falling freely at last. The July morning dawned bright and clear, painting the valley in shades of gold. Sophia walked carefully along the dusty path to church, one hand resting on her rounded belly, the other holding Maria's small fingers. Sam followed close behind, carrying their worn hymnal and a basket of fresh-baked cornbread for the after-service gathering. The white-clappered church stood peaceful against the mountain backdrop, its bell tower reaching toward heaven. Inside, sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting warm patterns across the wooden floor. The same pews that had once held whispers of judgment now welcomed them with familiar creaks. Sophia settled between Sam and Maria, smoothing her dress over her swollen middle. The preacher's replacement, a kind-faced man from Denver, nodded warmly as he opened his Bible. When the first notes of Amazing Grace filled the air, Sophia's clear voice rose strong and sure. Sam's deep bass joined in, and Maria's sweet treble wove between them. Other voices gradually blended with theirs. Mrs. Peterson, who now brought soup when Sophia felt ill. Tom Wheeler, who had helped Sam rebuild the hay barn. Even old Miss Jenkins, who had once turned away but now taught Maria to read. The hymns swelled, filling every corner of the small church with harmony. Sophia felt the baby move beneath her palm as they sang. She glanced at Sam, finding his eyes already on her, full of tender pride. Maria leaned against her side, small hand joining Sophia's over the promise of new life. Through the colored glass, heaven's light blessed them all, this family made whole by love's fertile grace. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.